I built something beautiful with Benson. 10 years of marriage, two amazing kids, a house that actually felt like a home with our golden retriever Max greeting everyone at the door. We met in college during my sophomore year. He was this sweet, ambitious guy studying business while I was working toward my teaching degree. We dated through the rest of college, and after graduation, everything just fell into place naturally. The wedding, buying our first house together, him landing that steady job at the consulting firm. I left teaching after Nathan was born because we both agreed one of us should be home with the kids, at least while they were little. Nathan's 7 now, all energy and soccer practices and constantly asking why the sky is blue or how airplanes stay up. Alicia just turned 4, still my little shadow who wants to help with everything from cooking dinner to folding laundry. They're good kids, happy kids. I made sure of that. While Benson was building his career and working late, most nights I was the one handling bedtime stories and scraped knees and all the million little things that actually matter in raising children. But somewhere along the way, I started feeling invisible. Not to the kids, they still needed me for everything, but to Benson, I'd become part of the furniture I had and the bath and the books and the bus time and all the drugs, and I wasn't there, and the bath time and the cleaning and the bath and the bathing and the bath, and no one had wanted to be that for us. So my work as a dad relied a lot heavier on me because they were lucky to work for that outlet. So even though most nights I was probably the only one working in the house, my time was the one that ended up going to the workplace. When was the last time he really looked at me, not just glanced up from his phone to acknowledge I was talking? When was the last time we had a real conversation about something other than Nathan's school schedule or whether we needed to call the plumber? I deserved more than that. I deserved to feel like a woman again, not just a wife and mother whose entire identity revolved around everyone else's needs. That's when I started looking forward to girls' nights more than I probably should have. Every other Friday, me and my friends from the neighborhood would hit downtown. Kathy from 2 streets over, Erica, whose husband Wayne works with Benson, and usually 2 or 3 other women from our circle. All of us married, all of us with kids, all of us desperate for a few hours to remember who we used to be before car seats and parent-teacher conferences took over our lives. We deserve this, Kathy would always say as we ordered our second round of cocktails. We work our asses off all week taking care of everyone else. A few hours to ourselves isn't asking too much. She was right. While our husbands got to interact with adults all day at their jobs, we were home managing tantrums and grocery shopping and trying to have adult conversations with 4-year-olds. The least they could do was watch their own children for one evening every 2 weeks so we could feel human again. Benson never complained about girls' night, which should have been a good thing, but somehow felt like proof of how little he cared about what I did with my time. He'd just nod and say, have fun, without even looking up from whatever he was reading, like I was asking permission to go to the dentist or something equally mundane. The first time I saw Lamar, we were at this trendy bar downtown that Kathy had been wanting to try. The music was actually good for once, not the usual classic rock that made me feel like I was drinking in my parents' basement. He was sitting at the other end of the bar with a couple of friends, and when our eyes met, he smiled like he was genuinely happy to see me. Not the polite, distracted smile I got from Benson most days, but a real smile that reached his eyes. Someone's got an admirer, Kathy nudged me, following my gaze. Don't be ridiculous, I said, but I could feel my cheeks getting warm. I'm just people watching. When he walked over to introduce himself a few minutes later, I should have shut it down immediately, should have flashed my wedding ring and politely declined when he offered to buy me a drink. Instead, I heard myself saying yes. And for the next hour, I had the most engaging conversation I had with a man in years. Lamar was 26, which seemed young until I remembered I was only 32 myself. He worked construction, had this easy confidence that came from actually doing physical work. Instead of sitting behind a desk all day, he listened when I talked, asked follow-up questions, laughed at my jokes like they were actually funny, instead of just being polite. Your husband's an idiot if he lets you out looking like that without him, he said as the girls were getting ready to leave. I should have been offended by the implication, but instead I felt this flutter in my stomach that I hadn't experienced in years. When is the last time Benson had even noticed what I was wearing, let alone complimented me on it? It's just girls' night, I said, which wasn't really an answer to anything. Maybe next time you could take a little detour, he said, handing me his number written on a napkin. You seem like someone who deserves better than the same old routine. I took the napkin, told myself I'd throw it away as soon as I got to the car, but instead I tucked it into my purse and tried not to think about it during the drive home. Benson was already asleep when I got back, which was typical. No, how was your night? Or did you have fun? Just the assumption that I'd had my little break and now everything could go back to normal. I kept Lamar's number for 3 weeks before I finally texted him just something casual about hoping he was having a good day, nothing that could be construed as inappropriate if anyone saw it. He responded immediately, and before I knew it, we were texting throughout the day. Nothing serious at first, just friendly conversation that made me smile when my phone buzzed. He was easy to talk to in a way that Benson hadn't been in years. When I mentioned being frustrated with Nathan's teacher, Lamar actually engaged with the problem instead of offering some generic, I'm sure it'll work out response. When I complained about feeling like a taxi driver with all the kids' activities, he sympathized instead of reminding me that this was what I'd signed up for when we decided to have children. You're too smart to be stuck in the suburbs playing chauffeur. He texted one afternoon while I was waiting in the car line at Alicia's preschool. You should be doing something that actually uses your brain. It was the first time in years someone had acknowledged that I might have ambitions beyond managing everyone else's. The schedule. The first time I met him outside of the bar was completely innocent, just coffee on a Thursday afternoon while both kids were at school. We sat in a little cafe across town where I was unlikely to run into anyone I knew and talked for 2 hours about everything and nothing. He told me about growing up with a single mom who worked 3 jobs to keep them afloat, about his dreams of maybe starting his own construction company someday. I found myself talking about college, about the teaching career I'd given up, about feeling like I'd lost myself somewhere between wedding planning and diaper changes. You're not lost, he said, reaching across the table to touch my hand. You're just buried under everyone else's expectations. There's a difference. That touch should have been a warning sign, should have reminded me that I was a married woman having coffee with a man who wasn't my husband. Instead, it felt like the first genuine human connection I'd experienced in months. I started timing my side trips during girls' nights, telling Kathy and the others that I had a headache or needed to call the babysitter, then slipping away to meet Lamar at whatever hotel bar he'd suggested. Nothing physical at first, just conversation and attention that I'd been starving for without even realizing it. Your husband doesn't deserve you became a regular theme in our talks. And honestly, it was hard to argue with that when Benson barely looked up from his laptop long enough to acknowledge I existed most evenings. Everyone wants to make assumptions about Lamar because of his age, because of his background, because of some run-ins he'd had with the law that were completely blown out of proportion. The system's designed to target guys like him. Young, confident, doesn't back down when some power-hungry cop decides to hassle him for no reason. But when you actually get to know him, when you see past all the stereotypes and judgments, he's gentle and thoughtful and treats me like I matter, which is more than I could say for my husband at that point. The first time we kissed, we were in the parking lot behind some sports bar downtown. I'd told the girls I was getting some air, and Lamar had driven over to meet me for a few minutes before I had to go back inside and pretend everything was normal. I've been wanting to do that since the night we met, he said afterward. And I had been wanting it too. I'd been wanting it too, even though I'd never admitted it to myself. I should have felt guilty, should have been thinking about my wedding vows and my children and the life I'd built with Benson. Instead, I felt alive for the first time in years, like I was finally doing something for myself instead of just existing to make everyone else's life easier. This doesn't have to change anything, I told him and myself. What Benson doesn't know won't hurt him. And it was true, wasn't it? I wasn't neglecting my kids or my responsibilities at home. If anything, I was a better mother and wife because I was finally getting my needs met somewhere. Nathan and Alicia were happy and well cared for. Benson had his comfortable routine exactly the way he liked it. Everyone was getting what they wanted, and I was finally getting something too. The physical relationship developed gradually over the next few months. Hotel rooms during extended girls' nights, afternoon meetings when both kids were in school. Lamar made me feel beautiful and desired in ways I'd forgotten were possible. He'd text me throughout the day, not about grocery lists or scheduling conflicts, but just to say he was thinking about me, that he missed me, that he couldn't wait to see me again. When was the last time Benson had sent me a text that wasn't about picking up milk or asking what time Nathan's game started? I got good at managing both worlds, better than I'd expected, actually. Benson was so wrapped up in his own routine that he barely noticed when I started paying more attention to my appearance, started buying new clothes, started seeming happier and more energetic around the house. If he thought about it at all, he probably assumed I was just enjoying my girls' nights and feeling good about having some social time, which wasn't entirely wrong. I was feeling good. For the first time in years, I was excited about something in my life beyond making sure everyone else's needs were met. You're glowing lately, Kathy mentioned one evening as we sat at our usual table, waiting for me to finish texting Lamar back. Whatever you're doing, keep it up. I just smiled and put my phone away. Let her think it was a new Skinna routine or yoga classes or whatever made sense to her. The truth was so much better than anything she could imagine. The night everything changed started like any other girls' night. We hit our usual rotation of bars, complained about our husbands and kids and suburban lives, drank just enough to feel rebellious without being irresponsible. Around 10 o'clock, I made my usual excuse about needing to check on the babysitter and slipped out to meet Lamar at a hotel bar across town. We'd been seeing each other for almost 6 months at that point, and I'd gotten comfortable with the routine. Maybe too comfortable because I didn't notice Erica and a couple of the other girls at a table near the hotel entrance when Lamar and I were saying goodbye in the parking lot. I didn't realize they'd followed me when I left the first bar. Didn't think to check my surroundings before kissing him goodnight next to his car, but they saw everything. The kiss, me getting into his car, us driving off together to spend the night at a hotel downtown, all of it. I found out later that Erica had been suspicious for weeks about my sudden disappearances during girls' nights, had noticed me texting constantly, had seen how I'd light up whenever my phone buzzed. Instead of talking to me directly like a real friend would have, she decided to play detective and drag some of the others along as witnesses. 2 days later, she called Benson, got his number from her husband Wayne's phone, and decided to blow up my entire life because she couldn't mind her own business. I had no idea any of this was happening. For almost 2 weeks after that night, I went about my normal routine, getting the kids ready for school, managing the household, planning the next girls' night. Benson seemed a little quieter than usual, but he went through moody phases sometimes when work was stressing him out, and I figured he'd snap out of it eventually. What I didn't know was that he'd hired a private investigator. Instead of talking to me directly about whatever Air had told him, instead of giving me a chance to explain, he paid some stranger to follow me around and take pictures like I was a criminal. The morning he confronted me, I was making breakfast for the kids and mentally planning my day. Nathan had soccer practice after school. Alicia needed new shoes, and I was supposed to meet Lamar for lunch while both kids were in class. Just a normal Tuesday morning in what I thought was my perfectly managed double life. Benson waited until both kids were outside playing before he sat down at the kitchen table with a manila folder and divorce papers. "We need to talk," he said, and something in his voice made my stomach drop. He opened the folder and spread out a series of photographs like he was dealing cards, me and Lamar kissing in various parking lots, me getting into his car, me coming out of hotels at times when I was supposed to be at girls' night or running errands. "You hired someone to spy on me," was the first thing out of my mouth. Because honestly, what kind of person does that? Instead of having an adult conversation about problems in our marriage, he goes behind my back and pays some creep to stalk me. "Yes, I did," he said, not even having the decency to look ashamed about it. I stared at the photos, trying to process what was happening. This wasn't how this conversation was supposed to go. In the version I'd imagined, if I'd ever been forced to imagine it, I would have had time to prepare, to explain, to help him understand that this didn't have to mean the end of everything we'd built together. I didn't want it to happen like this, I said, which was true. I'd never intended for him to find out at all. But if he had to know, it should have been on my terms when I was ready to have that conversation. But it did happen, he said, for months, apparently, while I was working to support our family, while I was home with our kids so you could have your girls' nights, you were sneaking around with some 26-year-old with a criminal record. You don't know anything about Lamar, I said, hating how defensive I sounded, and his age doesn't have anything to do with anything. His age has everything to do with this, Benson shot back. You're a 32-year-old mother of two, having an affair with someone who's been arrested for assault and drug possession. What exactly am I supposed to not know about that? The way he said it made Lamar sound like some kind of dangerous criminal, which was completely unfair. So he'd had some trouble with the law. Who hasn't at some point? The charges were bogus anyway, just cops targeting a young guy who didn't back down when they tried to intimidate him. You're making this sound worse than it is, I said. Worse than it is? He leaned forward and I could see how angry he was trying not to be. Sam, you've been lying to me for months. Lying to our children, sneaking around behind my back while I trusted you completely. I never lied to the kids, I said, because that was important. Whatever was happening between me and Benson, Nathan and Alicia didn't deserve to be dragged into it. You lied to all of us every single day, he said. Every time you kissed me goodbye, every time you told me you loved me, every time you tucked our kids into bed and then texted him afterward, he knew about the texting too. Apparently, I wondered what else his private investigator had managed to dig up, how long they'd been watching me, how many of my private moments had been photographed and documented. You can't take my kids away from me, I said, because suddenly the divorce papers on the table felt very real and very threatening. I'm not taking them anywhere, Benson said, but they deserve to have a mother who puts their safety and well-being above her own pleasure, a mother who doesn't bring dangerous men into their lives. Lamar has never even met the kids, I said. I would never put them in danger. You put them in danger the moment you started sleeping with someone with a history of violence, he said. What happens when this guy decides he wants more than just sneaking around? What happens when he shows up here looking for you? That's not going to happen, I said. But even as I said it, I could hear how naive it sounded. You're right, Benson said, standing up from the table, because you're not going to see him anymore. You're going to end this relationship today, and we're going to figure out how to co-parent our children while we get divorced. The finality in his voice scared me more than the photos or the divorce papers. This wasn't a conversation or a negotiation. This was him telling me how things were going to be from now on. Benson, please, I said, we can work through this. We can go to counseling. We can figure out what went wrong and fix it. What went wrong is that you decided to cheat on your husband instead of talking to him. He said, what went wrong is that you brought someone with a criminal record into our lives without caring how that might affect our children. What went wrong is that you've been lying to my face for months while I worked to support the family you were betraying. I never betrayed our family. I said, this has nothing to do with Nathan and Alicia. He said, you're their mother. Your choices affect them, whether you want to admit it or not. He was making me sound like some kind of monster when all I'd done was find someone who appreciated me for who I was. Yes, I'd made some mistakes in how I handled things, but the core issue was that our marriage had problems that we both needed to take responsibility for. What about your part in this? I asked. What about the fact that you've been emotionally absent for years? What about the fact that I felt invisible in my own marriage? What about the fact that you never talked to me about any of that? He countered. What about the fact that instead of working on our marriage, you decided to start a new relationship behind my back? He wasn't wrong exactly, but he was making it sound so much simpler than it actually was. Like, I just woken up one day and decided to have an affair for fun instead of gradually finding myself in a situation where someone finally saw me as more than just a wife and mother. I want us to try, I said. I want to end things with Lamar and focus on our family. It's too late for that. Benson said, I can't trust you anymore. Sam, I can't trust that you won't do this again the next time you're feeling unappreciated or bored or whatever it was that made you think this was okay. So that's it. I said, 10 years of marriage, 2 kids, everything we built together, and you're just throwing it all away. I'm not the one who threw it away, he said quietly. You did that when you decided someone else was more important than our family. The next few months were a nightmare of lawyers and court dates and custody evaluations. Benson refused to move out of the house, claiming he didn't want to abandon the children, which meant we were stuck living together while everything fell apart around us. He was civil but cold, speaking to me only when necessary and making it clear that any chance of reconciliation was off the table. I tried to maintain some kind of relationship with Lamar during this period, meeting him when I could and posting pictures on social media to show everyone that I was moving on and happy. But the stress of the divorce and the custody battle was affecting everything. And he started pulling back, claiming he didn't want to get dragged into legal drama. Maybe we should take a break until this all settles down, he said one afternoon. And I could hear in his voice that he was already checking out of whatever we'd had together. I'm getting divorced for you, I said, which wasn't entirely true, but felt true in the moment. But getting divorced because you got caught, he said, and that stung because it was probably more accurate than I wanted to admit. By the time the divorce was finalized, Lamar and I were barely speaking. He had moved on to someone else, someone younger and without kids and legal complications. I found out through social media, seeing pictures of them together at the same bars where we used to meet. But the real blow came when the judge awarded Benson primary custody of Nathan and Alicia. Despite my lawyer's arguments about maternal bonds and the children's need for stability, the court decided that my reckless behavior and poor judgment in romantic partners made me a risk to their well-being. I was granted supervised visitation every other weekend and one evening a week. Supervised, like I was some kind of danger to my own children. The court recognizes that both parents love their children, the judge said, but the children's safety and stability must be the primary consideration in custody decisions. Benson looked relieved, but not triumphant, which somehow made it worse, like this was just a necessary step in protecting our kids rather than any kind of victory over me. I moved into a small apartment across town and started the process of rebuilding my life. My lawyer assured me we had good grounds for an appeal, that the custody decision was overly harsh and could be overturned with the right argument. Courts are getting more progressive about these issues. She said, A, mother's romantic choices shouldn't automatically disqualify her from having custody of her children. She was right. Of course, the whole system is biased against women who refuse to disappear into traditional roles. A father can work 60 hours a week and be praised for providing for his family, but a mother who tries to maintain her own identity and needs is labeled selfish and reckless. I started posting about my healing journey on social media, sharing inspirational quotes about resilience and personal growth, not because I felt particularly healed or grown, but because I needed people to see that I was moving forward, that I wasn't going to be destroyed by this setback. The truth was messier and more complicated than anything I could post online. I missed my kids desperately during the weeks when I couldn't see them. I felt angry and betrayed by friends who had sided with Benson, who treated me like I was some kind of pariah for having needs outside of motherhood and marriage. Erica, the friend who had started this whole mess by calling Benson, tried to reach out a few months after the divorce was final. I hope you understand that I was just trying to do the right thing, she texted. I didn't want to see you throw away your family. I never responded. What was I supposed to say? Thank you for destroying my marriage and helping my husband take my children away from me. Thank you for deciding that my private life was your business to manage. The appeal is still pending. The lawyer thinks we have a strong case, especially since there's been no evidence of actual harm to the children from my relationship with Lamar. The original custody decision was based on speculation and moral judgments rather than concrete evidence of parental unfitness. The court overreached, she explained during our last meeting. Your personal relationships, as long as they don't directly endanger the children, shouldn't be grounds for limiting custody. No, she's right. I know that once we get in front of a different judge, someone who understands that mothers are allowed to be complex human beings with their own needs and desires, this whole nightmare will be corrected. Nathan and Alicia are in therapy now, which Benson claims is to help them process the changes in their family structure. But I know it's really just another way for him to control the narrative, to make sure they see me as the parent who disrupted their stable life rather than the parent who is trying to model authenticity and self respect. When I do see them during my supervised visits, they seem happy enough, but there's a distance that wasn't there before. Like they're not sure how to act around me now that our family looks different. Nathan asks fewer questions, and Alicia doesn't automatically curl up in my lap the way she used to. It's normal, my therapist assures me. Children adapt to new situations, but it takes time. Once you have more regular contact with them, those bonds will strengthen again. I have to believe that's true. I have to believe that eventually Nathan and Alicia will understand that I never stopped loving them, that everything I did was about trying to be a complete person rather than just disappearing into the role of wife and mother. Some days I wonder what would have happened if I'd handled things differently, if I'd talked to Benson about feeling neglected instead of finding someone who appreciated me, if I had been more careful about keeping my relationship with Lamar private, if I had ended things before Erica and her amateur detective work blew everything up. But then I remember how alive I felt with Lamar, how seen and valued and desired. I remember what it was like to have conversations with someone who was actually interested in my thoughts and dreams and frustrations. And I can't bring myself to regret finding that, even if it came at a cost I hadn't anticipated. The appeal hearing is scheduled for next month. My lawyer is confident that we can get the custody arrangement modified to something more reasonable, maybe shared custody with both parents having equal time. It won't undo everything that's happened, but it will be a start toward getting my life back to something that makes sense. Until then, I'm focusing on building the kind of life I want to have when Nathan and Alicia are with me more regularly. The kind of life where I'm not just existing to serve everyone else's needs, where I'm modeling independence and self-respect instead of martyrdom and sacrifice. Benson thinks he won something by getting primary custody, by turning our friends against me, by making me look like the villain in our story. But what he really did was force me to figure out who I am outside of his expectations and limitations. And that might be the best thing that could have happened to me. Even if it doesn't feel like it,